All right, we're streaming live. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Scott. How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. I feel good after the last couple of days. Big election. Good morning, victory, Scott. You know? How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Big election victory.
Big election victory, indeed. So I think we may have underestimated it a little bit on in our Tuesday night broadcast.
Okay.
So tell us about it.
Afraid to say the word wave.
Yeah. So we talked mostly about the House of Representatives nationally. What went on at the state level?
There were 300 seats changed. You know, to give you from Democrat to from Republican to Democrat, to give you an idea of what that means. In the 8 years of the Obama presidency, the Democrats lost 1,000 seats.
Oh, wow.
2 years of Trump, 300, gone, down the drain, you know?
And the state level is really important because that's where, you know, we have this Trump GOP Supreme Court, and state Republican legislatures were kind of a factory for right-wing, crazy reactionary right-wing bills that would then, you know, move up the pipeline and eventually be either rejected or affirmed by the Supreme Court.
And in particular, redistricting. It was the Koch brothers' laboratory, the state legislatures, you know, for national politics. And I remember that in Cleveland, I'm a Buckeye, by the way, Dennis Kucinich's district, you know, which used to be in the greater Cleveland area, they redrew that bad boy, and it was a district that went 300 miles from Cleveland down to Toledo or something like that, 300 miles long and a mile wide.
Wow, yeah, get all the Democratic voters into one district and leave the rest of the state to the Republicans. It's just disenfranchisement. There's no other word.
No other word for it.
On that end of things, you know, we saw very heavy voter suppression efforts in North Dakota, in Georgia, and elsewhere. What's the prognosis on that going forward? Is that something that we're still going to have to worry about?
We need a new Voting Rights Act, I think, you know. The Republicans have mastered the fine art of voter suppression. You know, they have a number of tricks up their sleeve to depress the vote. And the only way, since we got this right-wing Supreme Court, to deal with that is by a new Voting Rights Act, because the courts ruled that the old Voting Rights Act was no longer applicable in the southern states. And it's not just a southern state issue, you know. It happens all over
in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania.
Ohio, you know, no doubt about it. So, but now with, it looks like 231 majority with lots of women and lots of people of color, and it might go up to 238 because there's still another 12 or so. No, I guess it's another, well, yeah, I think that there are 12 undecided and a couple that are going to go GOP. It might be a 238 seat Democratic majority. So there's a lot of things that they can do, you know, to on voting rights, on health care, on labor rights, and so on and so forth. And
I think we do have to point out, though, that this is, you know, we keep talking about the number of Democratic seats, the number of districts that have flipped Democratic, whatever. This is not just a victory for the Democratic Party. This is a victory for the American people, for the huge mass mobilization around. This was a small d Democratic struggle and a huge step forward for that fight. It's not.
No doubt about it, because there was a broad coalition organized against Trump, you know, led by women, by labor, by young people, by the African American and Latino and Asian communities, by LGBTQ people. It was a huge, that was both inside and outside of the Democratic Party. So it's a victory in that sense, and we got to keep the pressure on. You know, you saw what happened with Trump firing his attorney general yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday? You know, in an effort to do what? Protect him from investigation.
And yeah, now people are turning out into the streets to demand that this investigation be allowed to proceed, that the activities of Trump and his cronies be brought to light.
Right.
This isn't about, again, it's not about protecting Jeff Sessions, who is one of the most vile right-wing creeps ever to occupy the attorney general's seat.
But he did recuse himself. I mean, that was good, So, and nor is it a pro FBI as such movement. It's a movement to bring Donald Trump to justice,
and to disorganize this really vicious, openly white supremacist political machine that sort of formed itself around him. Impeaching Trump would be a huge blow against
that's on the agenda, really. I mean, with the Republican majority, we have to admit that the GOP won the Senate, though it happened in red states. But with that majority, you impeach in the House, try in the House. I mean, the hearings are in the House, but he's tried in the Senate, right? So, I mean, it's really not realistic.
Are we going to convict him? No, the Senate, only the Senate can do that. But a motion to impeach and an impeachment, bringing him up on charges would already be a huge victory and a rebuke, as I said, to the Trump regime from the American people. Nearly,
the boy just might quit, because the amount of pressure on his administration from the, you saw how he was unhinged, he was like loco in that press conference the other day, he was.
Yeah, and I think it's not just him.
I'm sorry.
No, I interrupted you.
No, go on.
I think it's not just him. It's the Republican Party is getting increasingly desperate. It feels itself backed into a corner without much youth support, losing the support of white women in the suburbs, losing even some evangelicals. Its days as a political force are numbered, and we have to be prepared for it to fight in the most vicious way possible to retain power.
You say we have to fight not in the most vicious way possible, but in the most militant and the most.
Oh no, I was saying they will.
They're being vicious.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about young people and young people on the left who seem to be influenced by some of the politics that they talk about identity, and they see that as what we call equality as an obstacle to an understanding of class, and they're in the camera with guns and all that kind of thing.
It looks to me like, looking at comments on a lot of left Facebook pages, on ours, looking at comments that we sometimes get from people, that there's a section of the Marxist, revolutionary, socialist left that's falling under the influence of right-wing ideology. It's the only way I can explain it.
I hope it's a small section.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. I mean, because as you brought out, so I tried to kind of look through and come up with the main principles or tenets of what some folks are saying, and it looks like to be a revolutionary. Are you ready for this? You got to identify the Democrats as the main enemy of the working class. You have to reject the fight for equality because identity politics distract from class.
That's true.
And you have to oppose any kind of gun control and push for armed struggle as the route forward for the working class.
So it's Dems, guns, and denial of the struggle for democracy, what we call the struggle for equality. They see that as an obstacle to,
as a distraction, yeah,
distraction to a class. And so you kind of coined the term Trumpian Socialists. Is that?
It feels like it to me. It feels like the right wing is very deliberate in its attempts to divide, and I think they play on this gun issue.
So I heard that I was talking to one of our comrades in Texas this morning, and he said that 10% of the voters for Bernie went for Trump. You think that's kind of the kind of people you're talking about?
Not necessarily. Though this isn't a case of what's sometimes called like horseshoe theory or whatever, like the extreme right and the extreme left are the same thing. It's not that at all. The question is, for me,
what is it? Is it like social fascists? I mean, like during the third period where during the Zenoviev's domination of the Comintern, the Third International, they argued that social democracy was social fascism. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's not exactly that either. I think it's look. We know that there's the ruling class is always trying to split the working class and also trying to split the revolutionary section of the working class and revolutionary parties. And sometimes they do it by trying to, enforce a non-class approach to the fight for equality. But they also do it now by trying to I think, promote an economics only, what you might call a fake populist vision of class struggle that excludes a lot of other stuff. And by playing on this demand for violence, for guns.
So it's a narrow definition of class, not understanding. When they say working class, they mean white working class, and not seeing women, not seeing people of color, and not seeing a racial social division of labor.
Yeah, or maybe seeing them and not realizing that they have, that people might have other interests than wages. Seeing them and thinking that maybe, the fight against racism can only be solved under socialism, so let's wait for socialism to address it. Whatever it is, I think it takes us out of the fight for mass working class unity, which is the only way of building the force that we need for a revolutionary transformation of society.
What about the guns issue? Because one of our comrades put up a meme about the Parkland students the other day, and got a lot of comments about, we need guns for armed struggle and all that kind of thing. Is you mentioned that was one of the issues that played into it. There's kind of the notion that reasonable gun control, like background checks and that kind of thing, is tantamount to going into people's home and taking away their hunting rifle. Is that the position of the Communist Party?
No, that is certainly not our. We are in favor of the Second Amendment. We support the right to own a gun, but we also recognize that the demand for some reasonable regulation of the sale of firearms is a mass demand of the American people and of a huge section of the American working class.
Something's got to be done. You see what happened when that nut went into the synagogue in Pittsburgh the other day and killed.
Well, the synagogue, the yoga studio, the dance club.
Rogers, and then in California, it's just going on and on and on. And unless something is done, it's going to get worse. But let's deal with the issue with regard to our concept of the revolutionary process and this notion that we're going to get to social revolution by force of arms. That's also was evident in that debate on our Facebook page. And we don't uphold that kind of view. We propose that we want to pursue a democratic path, the
most peaceful path possible.
Peaceful transition to a socialism. We favor the creation of a new political party, a labor-led party that would lead, we hope, to what we call an anti-monopoly government that would lay the basis for socialism. And, but also, it's like kind of anarchist, adventurous politics to think that you can, fight the U.S. Army, with a .32 pistol, I mean, or even a rifle, going up against this the armed forces of the U.S. state. It's like,
I would say in the present moment, even if every socialist had an assault rifle in their home and were trained to use it, we would still be disarmed.
But social revolution is not the property of socialists. It's the property of the working class as a whole.
Absolutely.
And our position for almost 80 years more has been that in order to have a social revolution, you got to win over the majority of the working class, that means they have to be convinced politically, ideologically, that socialism is a desirable thing.
Absolutely. And even if, we say that we work for the most peaceful path to socialism possible, we say that violence is the primary weapon of the capitalist class that we counter with mass solidarity. So
let me ask you a question. Aren't revolutions don't they proceed by force? I mean,
they are a question of force, and every revolutionary movement has at one moment or another had to reckon with the violence used by the ruling class against it.
But there are also nonviolent and powerful means of force. A strike is a compulsory halt of production,
The question is
a form of nonviolent force that is very, very powerful. And we saw that used with great effect in the civil rights movement in the United States by Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the broader civil rights movement to a great effect.
Exactly. And that's
politics. Let me just make this. Politics begins with the millions, the tens of millions. In this country, with the hundreds of millions. And you have to have a mass approach, seems to me. What do you think?
I agree entirely. And even from, asking ourselves in the long perspective, when we're in this open struggle for socialism, when we're confronted with violence from the capitalist class, with attempts to destroy our movement, what's going to keep us safe? Is it going to be a gun, or is it going to be our mass unity, our mass solidarity? And I think it's the latter.
That's where security and safety comes from the people.
And that's where working class power comes from.
No doubt about it. Well, this has been This Week with the Communist Party. I'm Joe Sims in New York. And
I'm Scott Hiley in upstate New York.
And we're so happy that you joined us today. Before we end, I want to invite you to join I'm a card-carrying communist, red to the bone. And we hope you'll join, because in order to, get this Johnson going, in order to build a mass revolutionary movement, we need a mass communist party. We need a bigger Marxist, Leninist left. So we hope you'll join us. And we're going to be having our convention next summer. And I got my communist cup with me.
Got mine too.
And 2 communist cups and 2 cards, and you might be able to get yours if you join and come to our next convention, when, by the way, we'll be celebrating our 100th birthday,
Yep.
centennial year. So thanks, Scott. Nice talking to you.
Good talking to you as well.
Thanks, everybody, for engaging with us today, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Take care.